My channel is primarily about the villains of Batman the Animated Series, and it is true that I do place BTAS on a pedestal above all else. But it's not unheard of for me to talk about the other DCAU cartoons, especially Batman Beyond. I've covered the making of Batman Beyond a couple of times now. Hell, I did a whole month of Batman Beyond videos to commemorate the show's 25th anniversary back in January. But the quick summary is that the executives at Warner Bros. Mandated that the next project from the team that brought us Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, and the new Batman adventures must be about Batman as a teenager. While their earlier works had excellent ratings with the teen and young adult demographic, the executives wanted to secure a bigger slice of the young child market. You know, the ones that would want their parents to buy them the tie-in toys. Rather than scrapping everything that had come before, Bruce Timm, Paul Dini and Alan Burnett thought up the idea of a teenage successor to Bruce Wayne. But they weren't exactly enthusiastic about the idea, at least until Glenn Murakami was briefed. Glenn was incredibly positive about the idea and showed the team the possibilities ahead of them. This was an opportunity to create a wealth of brand new characters in a genre they hadn't really focused on before, futuristic science fiction. While many of the new villains took inspiration from Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, check out my video on this subject if you haven't seen it already, a handful of villains from Batman's campy Silver Age of comics were introduced in Batman Beyond. These were villains that likely wouldn't have worked so well in Batman the Animated Series, at least without a major overhaul. Spellbinder is one such villain. However, it's interesting to note that writer Bob Goodman initially imagined him as more of a phony magician with a top hat and a cape. Bruce Timm and Glenn Murakami scrapped this idea and streamlined his design, using a black and orangey red leotard, without realising that Spellbinder was a pre-existing Batman villain with a similar colour scheme. It's hard to blame them because, at the time, Spellbinder had only been in a handful of comics. The original Spellbinder appeared in 1966 Detective Comics 358. Delbert Billings, now there's a name, is introduced as an art forger that discovered the mesmeric properties of symbols. He would draw these symbols onto his costume and perform cartwheels to hypnotise anyone that got in his way, including Batman. The trick with Spellbinder's illusions was that if you died in the illusionary world, your heart would stop in the real world. Spellbinder deems this as a preferable way to deal with Batman. To the coroner, it would look like Batman had just dropped dead, with no way to link Spellbinder or his henchmen to the murder. In the first two instances, Batman was able to escape the illusion just in the nick of time, but by the third illusion, Batman figured out how to overcome Spellbinder's hypnotic abilities. In each case, there was an object rotating clockwise. In the first hallucination, it was a clock, the second a whirlpool, and in the third, it was a large barrel. Batman deduced that if he made the barrel roll counterclockwise instead, he'd break the spell. Once he was free of Spellbinder's illusions, Batman made quick work of him. Spellbinder would appear a handful of times, once battling Superman and twice against the Justice League, but he was a pretty insignificant villain. Spellbinder's most notable appearance was 1995's Detective Comics 691, during the Underworld Unleashed crossover, in which struggling villains were given the opportunity to sell their souls to the demon Neron in exchange for incredible powers. Spellbinder was one such villain. Or should I say a new Spellbinder accepted the offer. While the original Spellbinder refused Neron's offer, his girlfriend, Faye Moffat, gladly accepted the deal, shooting Billings in the head to seal the deal. Although that wasn't actually necessary because Neron had been making the offer to her, not Billings, but hey, it just goes to show how callous she was. The Spellbinder was able to create illusions that affected people in her immediate vicinity. The hallucinations were incredibly realistic, but she could be overcome by covering her eyes. The Spellbinder would go on to clash with the Birds of Prey, but she didn't really have a major role again. Now this brings us to the late 90s when Batman Beyond went into development. Batman Beyond Spellbinder used technology to create detailed hallucinations for individuals. He was armed with a glowing orb that resembled an eye which would beam the hallucination straight into his victim's mind. This orb evokes images of the third eye, the mental eye that allows us to see the imperceptible, and mysticism. But it's all for show. There's nothing supernatural about this guy, and it adds a layer of inauthenticity to him. In his first appearance, Spellbound, he targets the wealthy parents and employers of Hamilton Hill High School students. He has access to this information because he is Ira Billings, the school counsellor. Troubled children are sent to him to share what's bothering them, and he's supposed to be a trustworthy figure of authority. He betrays the children's trust, often using them as his pawns, hypnotising them into committing theft. While he shares his name with the comic book original, he has more in common with Spider-Man's foe Mysterio, a special effects expert that created realistic illusions to fool people. Billings instead creates virtual worlds that he imposes on people. He makes Chelsea Cunningham think she's on an adventure in some exotic jungle. Mr. Deakins thinks he's at war. Lorraine Tate that she's been transported to a monstrous alien world. And Batman thinks that he's been besieged by zombies. These fantasy worlds are incredibly cinematic and believable, despite how absurd the notion would be. They're like dreams, placing people in impossible scenarios, but it just makes sense at the time. When Batman first meets Spellbinder, he's made to believe that he's at the top of a tropical waterfall with an inviting pool of water below him. Batman dives into the pool, not realising that in the real world he's diving headfirst into near-Gotham rush hour traffic. The technology is incredibly advanced and dangerous in the wrong hands, in more ways than one. In the episode Hooked Up, we see Spellbinder's new scheme, offering troubled children access to their ideal fantasy worlds through his virtual reality pods. In these worlds, the sad and lonely children can be anything they want to be, from Donnie Grasso's dream of being a desirable rock star to Max's deep need for a loving family. But the price is steep. These false worlds are addictive, and some of the kids suffer from withdrawal symptoms in the real world. In some cases, the children would fall into comas and were dumped on the streets. There's also the fact that Spellbinder charges them a lot of money to access it. When they can't afford to pay, he encourages the kids to do his dirty work, committing robberies in order to fund their habit. It's a very clear analogy for drug addiction, and it's made all the worse that Billings was supposed to be someone these troubled kids could confide in. Instead, he weaponizes their misery and uses them to line his own pocket. Similarly, the addicts generally aren't portrayed in a sympathetic light. While Jessie is sympathetic because she uses Spellbinder's tech to escape the pressures of her job and live out a fantasy life where she is loved, Donnie and his friends seem to enjoy doing Spellbinder's bidding, particularly roping in Max and potentially getting her hooked. However, at the end of the episode, it's Max that steps up and saves Batman, showing that she could overcome her desires to do the right thing. Billings argued that he didn't get the compensation he deserved by the school, and that he was not appreciated. Most of us can probably relate at one time or another in our own lives. I'm sure there have been times where we've all felt unappreciated and poorly paid for our labour. In his mind, having wealth is the solution to all of life's problems, so listening to a bunch of rich kids complain about mundane things angered him. But the issue here is how Billings handles his feelings of frustration. Rather than seeking out a better paying job, getting additional qualifications to justify a higher wage, or simply waiting it out, he'd rather take a shortcut, violating people's minds and helping himself to their belongings. Billings is lazy, cruel, and callous, which makes him an ideal Batman villain. In his final appearance, Eyewitness, Spellbinder uses his tech to frame Batman for the murder of Mad Stan. While Stan was never really killed, Spellbinder hid him away in one of his virtual reality pods, everyone thinks that Batman caved his head in. This is more of a Commissioner Gordon episode and how she's very quick to think the worst of Terry. While Max and Bruce believe that Terry is innocent, or at the very least that something fishy is going on, the rest of the world doesn't even question Batman's involvement. To paraphrase Spellbinder at the end of the episode, it was easy because deep down people think the worst of Batman. Although it is kind of amusing how once Spellbinder's role is revealed, the police just go back to normal as if it never really happened, even though they have no idea what had happened to Mad Stan. Still, the end of the episode shows us that Stan was alive and well, happily blowing up institutions and celebrating the demise of bureaucracy in his virtual world. And that was Spellbinder's final appearance in the cartoons. He makes 2 appearances in the second volume of the Batman Beyond tie-in comics. Both stories were written by series writer Hilary J. Bader, who wrote the teleplay for Eyewitness. In Volume 2, Number 1, Spellbinder broadcasts a signal through the television sets targeting Batman. However, what Spellbinder didn't count on was that there'd be 2 people that consider themselves to be Batman, and therefore susceptible to his signal: Terry McGinnis and Bruce Wayne. Fortunately for Terry, he was grounded and his TV access had been revoked. The elder Batman was not so fortunate, donning his old costume one final time to try and stop what he thought was a rampaging Terry. Volume 2, Number 7 sees Spellbinder return to Hamilton Hill High, disguised as a scientist using machinery to record psychological profiles of students. Spellbinder suspected that Batman was connected to the high school somehow, and so he used a machine to scan their minds to deduce Batman's identity. Bruce combats this by implanting a preposterous memory in Terry's mind of his younger brother Matt being Batman. When it's Terry's turn to be scanned, the machine insists that this memory is true, and Spellbinder destroys the machine in anger. These tie-in comics are nice little extras that don't really contradict anything in the show, while at the same time they don't really add much. Still, if you yearn for more Batman Beyond stories, I recommend picking up the recently released compendium consisting of all of the in-continuity tie-in comics. So, in closing, Spellbinder is quite an interesting villain because of his roots in the comic books of both Batman and Spider-Man. He's a great example of the way the Batman Beyond creative team took an absurd character from the comics and changed him to suit their needs, while also being true to the essence of the character. The comic book original was a forger, a faker, a phony, that feared the punishment of his crimes. Batman Beyond Spellbinder was an arrogant, entitled liar, someone that presented himself as a trustworthy, compassionate figure of authority, but all he really cared about was lining his own pockets. He neglected his duty of care for the children under his supervision and exploited them, first by making them unknowingly commit robberies on his behalf, and then by corrupting them by getting them hooked on impossible dream worlds. He didn't care about the physical and mental harm he was causing them. He may have a science fiction gimmick, but the threat he poses is very much based in the real world. He targeted troubled, at-risk children and used them to line his own pockets. And what's worse, he didn't see the problem with what he was doing. And this is why I think he is one of the most irredeemable villains in Batman Beyond. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. Next time, I'm going to take a slight detour to look at Dick Grayson as Robin and whether Batman really needed a teenage sidekick, or if he was just another unwanted addition that was mandated by clueless executives. Hope to see you then.